basic places where they find oxalate in terms of hyperoxaluria, the big bad guy there is primary hyperoxaluria. Those people who have primary hyperoxaluria have a genetic issue where they actually produce higher than normal amounts of oxalate from their metabolism and high enough that they're not clearing it quickly enough so it starts to accumulate in the body. People who have genetic hyperoxaluria, let me be really clear here. Those people are going to be found when they're young. So pretty much everybody I deal with, if you're already in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc., you don't have genetic hyperoxaluria. You've got it secondarily to either your diet was really high in oxalate because you were trying to be extra healthy. That describes me. You may have taken different kinds of medications which stressed your system, particularly things like antibiotics, which then can deplete your B vitamins. And once our B6 in particular is depleted, we can end up with a tendency towards producing more oxalate, or certain kinds of supplements, herbals, vitamin C, things that we're taking in that are really high oxalate or which degrade to oxalate. So we're getting it secondary to medications, supplements, diet. That's how we end up with a lot of oxalate in our system. And the question I've got is why the medical research literature distinguishes between where your oxalate comes from. If oxalate being made in the cells can still travel all through the body and turn up in all kinds of tissues, then to me, there's no difference between that and I've eaten a high oxalate diet. I've acquired oxalate into the bloodstream and it gets trafficked around. So we'll have to see if there's more nuance there. But at this point in time, I just wanted to do a little bit on why do we end up where we are. I think for most of us, it's a combination of we were eating extra healthy because we wanted to deal with feeling less energy, having more problems with our immune system, just feeling less vibrant, less resilient. So we're trying to eat extra healthy. We end up eating this really high oxalate diet. And in my case as well, I also took high dose vitamin C for years. And so for people who are taking vitamin C, please know that the research indicates that as much as 50% of what you take in could end up as oxalate in your system. And so if you're taking 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams, which is nothing, I know people taking, 3 to 5 grams of it a day, 3 to 5,000 milligrams, that is a crazy amount of oxalate. If you're taking in 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C and you're going to expect then 1,500 milligrams of oxalate as a result, that is a crazy level. So it shouldn't be any surprise to us that we can end up in this place given the kinds of advice that we get about supplements and things like that. Oh, and if you're taking whole herbs, a lot of those whole herbs are crazy high. And liver problems are kind of one of the things to expect almost when you're dealing with oxalate because the liver has some key requirements like sulfate, where it's trying to get sulfate into the cell. And if it picks up oxalate instead of sulfate, then that's going to start to accumulate in that cell because the cell still needs the sulfate, so it's still going to be trying to get it. And what that results in is a lot of compromise on liver detox, so that we're not actually handling toxins in our system very well, which means we don't feel vibrant, we don't have enough energy, and so we try to do things like take milk thistle. And in one of life's great ironies, milk thistle as a whole herb is sky high in oxalate, just sky high. If you drink it as a tea, okay. If you take it as a tincture or an extract, okay. But if you're trying to be, again, natural and extra healthy and you're taking the whole herb, you're just adding to your oxalate load. So the reason we get where we are has been the best of intentions. But hopefully what we can do now is start to understand there are ways to get the benefits of certain things without getting the oxalate. And there are maybe better choices that are going to give us our nutrition or our nutrients, even if we're going to take supplements, without getting the high oxalate with it. So just easy rules of thumb, just generically that you share, extracts and teas are always going to be lower oxalate than the whole herb or the whole spice. That's across the board. All the testing that we've done indicates that. If you want to raise your vitamin C level, and hey, we're coming into flu season, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, how we keep ourselves healthy through the winter. Vitamin C is one of those things your body uses as a firefighter. So if you've got a problem, vitamin C can be very helpful. So how do we get more of it if we're not going to take higher and higher doses? If you take CoQ10, if you take vitamin E, if you take alpha lipoic acid, if you take zinc, all of these can help you to recycle vitamin C. And that's actually the human adaptation to how we handle vitamin C. So I've known people who are actually able to bring up their vitamin C level on something like an oat test by taking CoQ10. So we don't actually have to consume a ton of vitamin C as a supplement in order to do well. And if anybody's looked at my flu season menu, you'll see that there's lots of vitamin C every day in that menu. However, it's always this whole food sources. Why would that be better? In fact, in a whole food, you're more likely to get cofactors that help you to recycle that vitamin C. So there's nothing in the research that indicates that taking in natural vitamin C in the context of a whole food is bad. It works fine. And that menu shows you can get like 300 milligrams of it in a day without too much difficulty with the right selection of foods. But you don't want to take, and I'm going to say this, naked nutrients. There's a few of them that are really bad, where you don't want to take them all on their own without their cofactors and in the context of a whole food. Vitamin C is one, collagen's another, bone broth is a bad one, gelatin. All of those are things where, because of how our system handles them, we can end up with oxalate being kicked out at the other end. With vitamin C, it's a degradation. As we use vitamin C, it gets oxidized. If it doesn't get recycled back to its proper effective level, I'm going to say, then that degradation will eventually kick out an oxalate molecule. With things like collagen and bone broth and gelatin, what we're doing is kind of isolating collagen and gelatin in particular in a really concentrated form and without cofactors. So I would always say you want to get those things in the context of a meal or a whole food, ideally. And for most of us who are dealing with oxalate, bone broth is difficult as well because of histamine levels. So, but naked nutrients are bad. You always want them clothed in their proper whole food. And with that in mind as well, juices tend to be lower oxalate than whole fruits. So that's another way where you can get the advantage of something without necessarily consuming the pulp and the fiber and the skin, where those seem to be places where the oxalate is. It's in the structure of a thing. So preparation matters. So if you're taking a whole food and turning it into juice, that's a safer way to consume a higher oxalate fruit. So oranges can actually be fairly high oxalate, 20 milligrams or more per orange. So orange juice can be a great option there. The other thing which can be really helpful is your cooking method for a plant food. So soaking helps, boiling helps. You get rid of soluble oxalate that way. So these are all little things in terms of how we construct our diet, where we might want to balance out what I'm trying to get from a food versus how much oxalate or other toxin is present. And the more we do kind of a cost benefit analysis, if you will, in that area, the better we do. So that's a bit of a ramble, but I wanted to just kind of give somebody who might be newer to this a bit of context. Again, it's been a while since I talked about some of these topics.